All right, so good afternoon, Daze Professional Development Group. For anyone joining in the Zoom room, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining on in our group on Facebook. It's me, Danette Edwards, the founder of Daze Professional Development Group. I'm here today with Meico, Marquette, Whitlock, and he's going to talk to us today about 7 things hiring managers want you to know about getting hired. I'm going to tell you a little about Meico, and then I'm going to turn it over to him. Meico helps change makers create work life and tech life balance so they can do their best work, so they can do their best work better while living their best lives. He is the founder and CEO of Mindful Techie and author of Intentional Planner. Through speaking, training, and coaching, he facilitates transformative experiences that foster well-being in a hyper-connected and distracted world. He has worked with organizations such as Cigna, Greenpeace, and the World Wildlife Fund, and has been a featured speaker on ABC News, Fox 5, and Radio 1. He is a former triathlete, wow, loves salsa dancing, and makes the world's best vegan chili. So join me today in welcoming and thanking Meico for leading this presentation for us today. I'm going to immediately turn it over to him. Meico, please add anything that I left out that you want to highlight, and then we'll begin. I'm going to turn my video
Awesome.
and mute myself off.
Awesome. That was perfect. Thank you, Danette. So I'm excited to be with you today to talk about the 7 things hiring managers want you to know about getting hired. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump in. We're going to do a little bit of a warm up. Then we're just going to go ahead and jump in. But you are here if you're listening to this, either as a live stream or the recording. Perhaps you're frustrated by your career search. Maybe you're not sure what you might be doing wrong. And maybe you're just curious about the perspective from a hiring manager's point of view about what you could be doing to improve your prospect of landing an opportunity in the career of your choice. And so as a hiring manager in my previous roles, I can tell you that I see tons of really simple things that folks do that really remove them from the process. And so my hope is to share with you a little bit of wisdom, some of the things from my perspective as a hiring manager that can really improve your chances. So the purpose of this session really is to help you to get clarity about those things. And also, if you're experiencing frustration, to help you to reduce some of that frustration and help you to really maximize the time and energy that you're investing in your search. So again, we're gonna learn about the 7 things today. We're gonna do some work to help you to reduce your frustration. And then I really want to spend a lot of time today answering your burning questions. So I'm going to move through my 7 things pretty quickly. And then I want to leave space to answer any burning questions that you have and to really spend time engaging with you throughout the Q&A. So Danette already said a little bit about who I am, so I won't belabor the point other than to say that in my current role, I have a small team that I manage, but I've spent most of my career actually working in government and nonprofit, although I've worked across sectors. And in those roles, I have been a candidate. I have worked with recruiters as a candidate. I have also worked with recruiters as a hiring manager. I have designed hiring processes from the intake process through to the interview process and the interview questions and the exercises, salary negotiation. I have done it soups to nut. And so what I'm going to share with you today is informed by that experience. So if you want to stay connected, if you want to join the email list, you can text Live on Purpose to the number on the screen. You also have my contact information that is there as well. And I'll provide this information again at the conclusion of the presentation. For folks that are just interested, perhaps in staying connected, maybe you have follow-up questions, that information is available for you on the screen. And also I'll be providing it later on throughout today's training. But as we get started, I want to invite us to just take a moment to pause, to center ourselves, and to really bring us into today's conversation. I know that for many of us, particularly in the current environment where we're dealing with the pandemic, we're dealing with social unrest and Black Lives Matter in the US, we're dealing with a highly contentious political season. So there are so many things that are going on in our lives. And so our job search, our career search doesn't exist in a vacuum. And so what I want to offer to you is just a really simple warm-up exercise to help you to clear your mind, clear your heart, and to really open up space for you to be fully present and to take whatever it is that you need to take from today's presentation. So with that being said, I'm going to invite you to do an exercise that I call the lion's breath. And so this is essentially a breathing exercise just for a few moments that we're going to do together. And I invite you, wherever you are, however you are, to just take a moment to, if you are seated, to perhaps close your eyes if that feels comfortable, that feels right for you, and to take an upright and comfortable position, feet firmly planted on the ground. If you're lying down or standing, just choosing to take notice and be grounded in whatever it is that's supporting you in this moment. And most important, just to choose a position that just feels good for you, that it feels good for the body right now. Again, close your eyes if that feels comfortable for you. If you're seated, you might choose to place your hands palm down or face up just above the knees. And just take a moment right here and now to just notice the breath in the body as it naturally occurs, perhaps in the rise and the fall of the belly of the chest, perhaps in the in and out breath through the nostrils or the mouth. Just taking an opportunity to notice the breath. And in the next few moments, I invite you to just follow my guidance as I guide you through the process of breathing in 3 times through your nose, fully and deeply, and then out again through your mouth, doing the lion's breath, which is where you give that audible ah as you're breathing out, just to release all of that tension, all the negative energy that might be built up, and to make space for the good stuff to come in. So we're going to do our first one here, breathing in fully and deeply through the nose, and out through the mouth. And in again through the nose. And out through the mouth. And one final time, in through the nose. And out through the mouth. Allow the breath to return to its natural rhythm in the body. And if you chose to close your eyes, I invite you in this moment to open your eyes when you're ready, if that feels right for you. And I share this because there's so much that is happening for us right now. And controlled breathing is one of those things that is pretty simple to do. It's free, it's accessible, particularly if we're able-bodied. It reduces stress, it increases energy. It's highly effective and simple to do, and it's evidence-based. We have more than 2 decades of research that shows the value of this. It's just a really simple thing to do to lower your stress level, to help you to reset, to help you to refocus in those moments where you might be off center, you might be upset, you might be frustrated, you might be feeling anxious. Just one simple tool that I offer to you to help you with that process. And so with that being said, now that we're all warmed up, I'm just going to dive into what we have today. So if you're ready, go ahead and give somebody a high five in the chat or a high five in the comments and let them know that you're ready to learn about the 7 things. And we're going to go ahead and get moving here. And so the 7 things that I'm going to share with you, these are 7 things from my perspective as a hiring manager based on my experience. It's not intended to be exhaustive. It's not intended to be representative of all hiring managers. But I want to share with you some things, again, as someone who has worked soups to nuts as a hiring manager and also as a candidate on both ends of this. So I want to share with you some things that I hope will be beneficial for you. The first thing here is to be intentional. Be intentional. And what do I mean by that? I mean, when you are going about your career search, one of the first things you want to make sure that you're doing is you're seeking out opportunities that are actually aligned with your experience, that are aligned with your interests, that are actually aligned with your skill set. And this is going to require you to get clear about what you're seeking, you know, what type of role you're seeking, what type of company that you're interested in working with, perhaps how much money you want to make, where you want to live. Are you willing to move if you need to move? What are you thinking about in terms of whether you want to work remotely or in person or a little bit of both? Do you want to work with customers? Do you want to just work behind the scenes with your colleagues? Getting clear about those things is critically important. And also getting clear about why it is that you are interested in that opportunity is very important. This is going to save you a lot of time in terms of applying for the right opportunities and weeding out those that might not be a good fit for you. It's going to save you time, and it's going to save the hiring manager's time as well. Part of this being intentional also means that, particularly if you're frustrated with your search, if you've gone through a long search, making sure that you're being conscious of whether or not you're in a state of frustration or if you're in a state of desperation, because that energy negatively impacts your ability to be fully present for opportunities that might be a good fit for you. And so if you want to make sure that you're intentional about being present to that and shifting that energy from being excited, being focused, and being intentional. The last point I'll make here is that one of the reasons this is also important in terms of being intentional is, as hiring managers, at least when I was working in my last several positions, I would receive hundreds of resumes and cover letters for one position. And it didn't matter what level it was. I work for a medium-sized organization. And so we receive hundreds of applications. And so imagine if you're applying for a corporate position and the HR person or the hiring manager is receiving hundreds or thousands of applications for one position. And so being intentional means that you're going to have a greater chance of actually standing out and have a greater chance of actually advancing through the process. When you're not intentional, it gives us a reason to actually weed you out of the process. And when you have hundreds of applications to weed through, one of the things I tell people is that it sounds overwhelming, but it's actually not, because from a hiring manager's perspective, I'm able to easily weed out folks who aren't being intentional. And I'll share a couple of other ways that as hiring managers, we're able to instantly, for the most part, or very quickly weed people out of the process because they are doing a number of these things that I'm going to talk with you about. So the first one here, again, be intentional. The second thing here is about following directions. This is one of the fastest ways to get excluded from a process, is not following directions. If the job posting, for example, asks you to submit a cover letter with your resume, submit a cover letter. If the cover letter instructions ask you for a salary range, submit the salary range. If the job instructions say, do not call us to check on the status of your application, please don't call us. Please follow the directions, because what happens is when you don't follow directions, you quickly get weeded out of the process. The last thing I would say here is, I know that many of you, as you're going through this process, you might be eager to know where you're staying with your application. Please know that we have received your application. And in the process where we're getting hundreds or thousands of people that are interested in the position, if everyone called, if everyone emailed us, imagine how much harder that would actually make the process. So please follow the directions. Please heed the instructions. As a hiring manager, I took a lot of time to be really clear with the job postings and the instructions to clarify that we get a large volume of applicants, and to please not call, and to please know that we reach out to the folks that we're interested in talking to. And it's not personal against you. It's just that it would be impossible for us to literally reach out and provide a status update to hundreds of folks or thousands of folks who apply for positions. So please follow the directions. If you want to stand out, one of the first things you can do is to actually follow the directions. The third thing here is to do your homework. Do your homework. Doing your homework means doing research on the company, doing research about the position. That means doing research about potentially who you might be working for or working with. It means tailoring your cover letter and your resume to the position that you're actually applying to. We can tell if you have done your homework. We can tell if you've actually tailored it. And we can tell if you're just sending out a generic resume and applying for random positions. We can tell by looking at the quality of your application. And so that's one of the other ways that we were able to weed you out, because we can look at that and tell that you haven't taken the time to customize it based on what we asked for in the job description or in the application process. So we want to also, if you make it to the interview process, we want you to ask really good questions, okay? We want you to ask really good questions, and this is really important. So we want to, and the questions should be informed by your research that you've actually done. The last thing I will say about this particular point is to, when it comes to your homework, is to make sure that your resume is customized for the position that you're applying for. And if for any experience that you're listing, for any opportunity or job you're listing on your resume, make sure that you are indicating how you actually excelled in that particular position. What are the accomplishments? Don't just tell us about what you did, but tell us about what were the 2 or 3 accomplishments that you actually had. How was the company better off because of the work that you did? What's work that you actually did at that particular position that causes you to stand out because no one else could have done it as well as you would have done it. Those are ways that you can actually stand out, but that's going to require you to actually do your homework. So I see that we have some questions that are coming in, and we are going to
I'm sorry, Meico. These, I'm just typing them. These are all
okay.
for the end, but I'm just going to type them so we don't miss any. Sorry.
Okay, perfect. So
okay.
I will come back to those questions. So please know if you're submitting questions, Danette is filtering those through. So we will answer those questions, and we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A. So please keep your questions coming. So again, so do your homework. All right. So number 4, be honest. Again, I want to underscore this. Be honest and show integrity. And know that as we're looking through this, many of us are reasonable people, and we're not looking for a perfect candidate. And we try to craft the job description in a way that we're able to have that come across for most of us. I know that there's some folks that are sort of looking for, they're looking for something that doesn't exist. And there are some folks that, in terms of hiring managers, that perhaps have an opportunity to grow and to evolve. But for most of us, we have realistic expectations about what we're looking for. So we want to know about your growing edges, particularly if you make it through the interview process. You want to know about your growing edges because it's going to help us to support you if you're actually selected and if you're actually hired, right? We want to fill the position with the best person. We want you to succeed because ultimately it's very costly to have a position open, right? The longer a position stays open, it's costly in terms of the time that we're spending actually going through the process. And as a hiring manager, where I'm a director in my role, but I'm also the hiring manager, that the amount of time that I'm spending on hiring and going through that process, trying to find someone, is time that I'm taking away from the main duties of my job. So I don't want to be spending all my time going through this process. And so when I go through this process, I want to make sure that I'm finding the right candidate. And so you being honest about the process, being honest about your experience, being honest about your credentials, being honest about your certifications, being honest about your skill set actually helps us, and it helps you, right? It helps both of us not to waste each other's time. The other thing is that particularly in certain sectors and communities, and particularly among recruiters, we talk to each other. And so if you are dishonest or you're not telling the truth, that can actually get around and make it harder for you to actually land the type of opportunity that you are actually looking for. Okay. So the 4th thing you want to be able to do is to pay attention to the details, or to mind the details. What do I mean by that? So you want to do your homework and you want to tailor your application. You want to tailor your resume. You want to make sure that you're doing your research in terms of preparing for the interview, but you also want to make sure that you're paying attention to things like typos, right? Things like if the job description indicates who the job reports to or what team it's on, that you're actually addressing it to the person who is the actual hiring manager for that role, or that you're actually addressing it to the person who's leading that particular team. In many cases, you can look up the team leads on the website. The directory is there. Not misspelling the name. So I was surprised at the number of folks that you've done your homework, you've taken the step to actually figure out that I'm the hiring manager, but then you misspell my name, right? Or in a number of cases, because of my name, some people aren't sure if I'm male or female. And so I was often misgendered, right? And so just doing a quick Google search will pull up pictures and my LinkedIn profile where you can see who I am, what I look like, and you can see my pronouns, and you can clearly see that I'm male and identify as male, right? And you can address me accordingly. So making those kinds of mistakes tells us that you're not paying attention to the details. And if you're not paying attention to the details through the application process, which is really your first assignment when you're applying for the job, if you're not following directions, you're not minding the details, that tells me as a hiring manager that you're probably not going to follow the details or follow the instructions when you're actually hired, that you're probably going to be a pain to actually manage, and you're going to make my job easier because I'm going to spend a lot of time cleaning up messes that you're creating, right? So be clear about following the directions, minding the details. If you need support with actually, proofreading your cover letter and resume, have someone do that for you if you know you need that kind of support. But make sure that those things are clear. Make sure that the formatting for your cover letter and your resume, it matches, right? The same fonts and things of that nature. Make sure all those things are actually lined up. Those things actually matter. We notice those inconsistencies, and again, in a process where we are getting hundreds and thousands of applications, that is one of the easiest ways to get weeded out of the process. So number 5, it is not personal. Again, I'm going to reiterate that it is not personal. We receive, again, hundreds and thousands of applications or interest in a position. We don't know you. Trust us that it's not personal. In many cases, the vast majority of cases, it is not personal. There is lots of competition for a number of these opportunities. And depending on the organization, there might be lots of internal factors that have nothing whatsoever to do with you. And so we do our best to avoid unnecessary frustration on your part, but recognize that we are human, recognize that things happen that impact the process, and that it's not personal for you. And so what I recommend in this regard is to, number 1, submit your application. If you're making it through the interview process, go through the interview process, follow up if you have an opportunity to go through the interview process per the instructions provided by the person that you're being interviewed by, and then release it and let it go and move on to the next opportunity. If we are going to follow up with you, if we're going to circle back with you, trust us. If we want to hire you, we're going to follow up, and we're going to do everything in our power to make that happen. But once you've applied for a position, once you've interviewed for a position, once you've done your due diligence, release it and let it go, and move forward. Don't spend your energy being frustrated or getting your all of your energy sort of been out of shape because of the uncertainty in the process. The best thing that you can do is to keep moving forward. That's going to be the best for you in terms of your own just mental health and well-being, and being open to all the opportunities that are out there. So again, it's not personal. All right, number 6, please don't stalk us. All right, so number 6, again, please do not stalk us. If the instructions say don't call us, please don't call us. If the instructions say don't email us, please don't email us. And this is particularly the case if you have not been selected for an interview. Trust us that we received your application, first of all. We've received your application, and in many cases, because we received so many, we give clear instructions that says, due to the volume or something like that, at least the language that I used to use, due to the volume, we're only able to follow up with the candidates that are actually selected for an interview, or that are where we're actually ready to make an offer. Okay, so please don't stalk me on LinkedIn or Instagram. Okay, please don't call me or email me once your application has been submitted. That is one of the easiest ways to get disqualified from a process. Again, release, let it go, and move forward. Okay, so It makes you look bad as a candidate. It annoys us. And if you're getting hundreds of thousands of those, imagine how much harder it actually makes our job, okay? The last thing I will say is to express thanks. So we like it when you send thank you notes. And so if you have gone through the interview process, right, where you've made a connection with the person that's interviews you, the person that you might be working with, it's perfectly okay and appropriate if you have that person's information, or if you have the HR person's information, or in some cases, you might have to go through a recruiter where you send the recruiter the thank you note and the recruiter will pass it along on your behalf. That is perfectly okay. That's one way to help you to stand out. So if you make it through that process, through that part of the process, that's perfectly okay. A recommendation I have here is to keep it succinct. Don't be pushy, and don't ask a lot of follow-up questions. Don't ask questions that actually create more work, right? So you're sending your thank you note under the guise of trying to get an update on the process, or you're trying to ask additional questions that you didn't ask during the interview. The time to ask questions to get clarity is during the interview. So if you're not clear about the next steps, generally what we try to do is we don't want you, particularly if you made it through to the interview process and we've made a connection with you, we've made a human to human connection with you. We want to follow up with you, right? We want to reduce the uncertainty, and we want to make sure that we are giving you the courtesy that we want to extend it to us if you've made it to that point in the process. So if those things aren't outlined in the interview, it's perfectly okay as the interview is wrapping up to ask, so what are the next steps? When can I expect to hear from you? Or should I expect to hear from you if I'm not selected? You can ask those questions during your interview to get clarity on that. So by the time you leave, you have clear expectations about what to expect or what not to expect moving forward. So those were the 7 tips. And I want to share with you, before I get into the questions, I want to share with you a few bonus tips. So a few things here. One, be persistent and consistent in the process. Again, apply, interview, follow up as needed and as appropriate, and then release and let go and keep it moving to the next thing, right? Don't get stuck in being tied to one particular opportunity. Keep it moving. That's going to keep your energy high. It's going to reduce that energy tied to desperation or frustration. And it's just really going to, overall, from my experience as a candidate and also as a hiring manager, it's just going to make it easier for you to really manage some of the lows that can probably come about, particularly if you're going through if you're going through a pretty extensive or a long search. Also know that the process and how you apply is going to be different depending on the organization, depending on the size of the organization. For larger organizations, generally it's going to be managed by a recruiter or an HR person. Some organizations, a lot of the organizations have these application systems that process you on the front end. Those you're going to typically see for larger organizations. For smaller organizations and medium-sized organizations, I've found that you actually have a better opportunity to connect directly with the hiring manager. So in my case, I worked for a medium-sized organization, and if you submitted your application through the process, I would actually see every application that would be submitted. So you want to be mindful of that as you're moving through the process. Relationships matter. Relationships matter. So most of the opportunities that you're going to land are going to be through relationships. When I think about my career trajectory, the vast majority of my opportunities have come through connections. And so making sure that you are tapping your network of folks, emailing your friends and family, letting them know what you're looking for, sharing your resume and cover letter, and letting them know what opportunities to be on the lookout for. And making sure that if you're looking, that you're active on LinkedIn, you're creating value for folks, but then you're also being intentional about how you're connecting and creating new relationships. And then the last thing here that I would say is this last one is particularly important for new graduates. So if you're a recent graduate, you need work experience. The chances of you getting hired for a position is going to be really unique if you don't have any work experience and all you have is your education experience. I can tell you that as a hiring manager, you could have the best credentials. You could be a Harvard grad, you know, MIT, PhD, whatever it might be, you know, the highest of the highest in terms of credentials. But if you didn't have any relevant work experience, you know, if you've gone from undergrad to graduate school and you come out and you don't have any relevant work experience, no internships or anything like that, you haven't worked at Starbucks, you haven't bagged groceries or anything, your resume is going to get passed over no matter how good your grades are or how good your credentials are. Now, this is going to vary depending on the type of role you're applying for and who the hiring manager is. But unless you are in academia, right? Unless you're applying for a job in academia, that might be a little bit different. But if you are applying for a role outside of academia, chances are not having any relevant work experience is going to actually work to your disadvantage. The last thing I will say too is to, depending on the type of organization or the type of role that you're applying for, if you have experience that's not directly related to the work, but it actually demonstrates character, it demonstrates, you know, management skills or things like whatever the skill set is that might be required for the role. So let's say, for example, you worked at Starbucks as a manager, for example. Although that might not be directly related to the role at hand, for me as a hiring manager, speaking for myself, for me as a hiring manager, I actually see that as a value add, right? And so I was like, oh, okay, this person has customer service skills, this person has management skills, in addition to the other skills specifically that I'm looking for. And it actually makes you, in my opinion, a more well-rounded candidate. And so you just want to do your homework and research to get a sense of how that might make sense depending on the type of opportunity that you're applying for and the organization that you're applying for. There's no one size fits all or right answer when it comes to this. So you just want to be mindful of that. And I'm just, again, sharing with you from my experience. It might be different for other hiring managers, but for me, I feel like that's a value add. All right, so with that being said, I have shared my thoughts. I'm gonna dive into the questions that I see in the chat and share my experiences. As we do this, I wanna just leave you with one thing, which is to think about, you know, what's one new strategy that you will try coming out of this conversation. I want you to be thinking about think about one new thing that you're going to do differently, one new thing that you might want to try as you think about this. I'm going to put my contact information on the screen, so if you want to stay connected, and then we're going to go ahead and get diving into the questions. Danette, I see you there, so.
So you want me to? I'll read them to you so that our everyone can. Am I muted? Oh.
No, I can hear you.
Okay, I'll read them so that everyone on Facebook can hear the questions.
Excellent.
All right, so, and I didn't drop the comments, guys, in here because we have plenty of questions, okay? What is your stance? Some of these you covered, but I'm just gonna, maybe you might want to say more, okay?
Yes.
All right, so what is your stance on college or advanced degrees versus work experience and no or lower level degree if there's no education requirement for the position?
Great question. So from my perspective as a hiring manager, I look at a combination of education and relevant work experience and skills, however you got those skills. And so for me, an educational mismatch or not having a degree in a specific field is not a deal breaker for me as a hiring manager. That being said, it depends on the organization and it depends on the sector. So for example, for government, particularly in the US, having years of service and a relevant educational degree, and depending on the level of education, is really important. In the private sector, not as much, and perhaps in the nonprofit sector, not as much as well, but it depends really on the organization. You want to get a sense of, as you do your research on the organization, based on how the job description is written, that can be an indication. If you're working with the recruiter, asking the recruiter like how flexible this requirement is. At the end of the day, my best recommendation would be, if you feel like the opportunity is a really good fit, you have the skills and you're interested, but there's an educational mismatch, go ahead and take the chance to apply. You know, there's no harm in doing that. Like, if you feel like it's really aligned, again, going back to that number one thing that we want you to know about being intentional. If you feel like it's really aligned, but there's a mismatch there, go ahead and apply. And if you have an opportunity to submit a cover letter, right, if that's something that's allowed for the application process, then you can explain that in the cover letter.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Okay. What is a good follow-up time after an interview? Is it okay for candidates to send an email follow-up for status? If so, how long after the interview?
So in terms of follow-up for the interview, definitely within, I would say within 24 hours. If you want to stay top of mind, definitely within 24 hours. It lets us know that you're being attentive, and that you are responsive and that you have your stuff together. So definitely within, I would say within 24 hours. You can certainly do it after that, but for me as a hiring manager, I'm like, oh, okay, this person's really on it. You know, again, keep it succinct. Don't ask me a bunch of follow-up questions. Those are questions that you should ask really in the interview and not in your think, you know, unless it's something that's really, really, you want to be mindful. If you're going to ask a follow-up question, that make sure it's a really good question or a necessary question. Is it okay for candidates to send an email follow-up for status? It depends on what the person that you interview with, or the HR person or the recruiter shares with you. If I would generally ask that question during the interview question, when you talk about next steps, I would ask, is it okay if I follow up within blah, 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 if I don't hear from you? In my case as a hiring manager, because we receive so many applications, I would tell candidates for the initial application process that we're only going to follow up with you if you are selected. If you made it through the interview process, by that point, it's been whittled down to a handful of folks. And so my commitment was to follow up with everyone, regardless of what the outcome was. And so, so you get clarity about those things. Generally speaking, if you haven't gotten clarity about that, particularly if you're applying for a role and you're one of those people that are sort of are inquiring, did you get my application? When are we going to get a stat? Don't do that. That's really annoying. And I just put you at the bottom of the list. I just take you off the list. What do you, okay. So those are my thoughts.
All right. So, what do you want to see in an informational interview request email? So you are a hiring manager, but this is if someone is just contacting you, kind of cold contacting you to say, would you host me for 15 minutes? Not necessarily come in, but now virtually have a conversation about opportunities or what you do. What do you want to see in that kind of an email?
So I'll say two things. So one, this is not the kind of request that I would entertain cold unless I had a previous relationship with you, or unless it was a referral. Someone said, oh, my friend is interested in working with this organization, or we're working with you. That's a good one. Could you talk to this person? If you sent me a cold request and I don't know you, I'm likely not going to accept the request. Every hiring manager is different.
Yeah.
But again, you just have so much going on that I don't have time to talk to you, as well-meaning as that might be. And I don't even know about you as a quality of a candidate. I don't know if that's a good investment of time and energy.
Yeah.
That being said, if you're going to do it, again, it just varies by hiring manager. Show that you've actually done your homework, right? Have one or two specific questions that perhaps aren't going to be answered on the website or by doing a Google search. Because if you're requesting an informational interview, and then you haven't done your homework, it's like, well, you just could have read the website. You could have just done a Google search, right?
Wasting my time.
Yeah. The other thing I would suggest is, if you're going to do it cold, you might have more success if you were to use LinkedIn to find folks that maybe worked at the organization, or maybe even better, someone who doesn't work at the organization anymore, and to just say, hey, Danette, I saw that you used to work for XYZ organization. I'm applying for a position. I know you're no longer there, but I'm curious if you have 15 minutes to talk with me about your experience or blah, 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 blah. Yeah. That might be a better way to go about it, because chances are if you are reaching out to someone that cold without a connection or referral in the organization, it's just going to be weird, and they probably ain't going to have time.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just get this one, which is a little bit of a rebuttal. Amy, drop some more information on that question, please. But I'm going to give it to Meico. So she says, but you just said not to call, not to check back. So Amy, just write a little more information on that, and we're going to go to a next question so that I can understand exactly what you were saying. I know it has something to do with the follow-up time after the interview. So give us a little more clarifying information on that, and then we'll go to the next question here. I'm going to read it, but I think we already know. What is your stance on thank you emails after interviews? But you already said, yep.
Yeah. Yes. And again, with the follow-up makes sense when you have made it through the interview process. If you've submitted your application and you haven't heard back, please don't, at least if the instructions say, please don't call or please don't email, please don't do that. But if we've actually had a phone interview, we've actually had a face-to-face interview, and you know who I am, and we have a discussion about it, whatever it is, it's okay. Number one, it's okay in those circumstances to send a thank you, right? Send a thank you note regardless. Now, to follow up, you want to get clarity about that before you leave the interview. Is it okay if I follow up with you after X amount of time if I don't hear from you? You want to get clear about that with the organization.
All right, Amy, I'm waiting to get here if you're still there. If you have any more on that, or if that was answered, if you have any more clarifying on that. Okay, so a lot of times I wasn't that comfortable asking for a specific salary, even when I met the criteria. How can I overcome this? How do you want a candidate to approach the salary negotiation? This is not them initiating it. It's just how do they approach that when it comes up?
So here I have a lot of thoughts about this. So as a hiring manager, or as a candidate, I would ask the question first, right? But here's the caveat. Don't have it be one of the first questions that you ask, because if that's one of the first questions you ask, that indicates that you're thinking about money over whether it's a good fit, right? So you want to ask questions first during the interview process, or wherever you are in the process, about fit, etc. You want to determine all those things before you then get to the salary piece. That being said, you can potentially have an edge if you broach the conversation first, right? And so there's some things you can say. So for example, if the salary range isn't disclosed, first of all, do your homework, right? And there's a lot more we can say about how you actually do that. But just to be succinct, do your homework, talk to peers, look at the different websites and resources that are out there, and have a sense of what you're going into the conversation with in terms of range. But you can ask the question, so like, okay, so I know that I have a better understanding of what you're looking for. Can you give me a better sense of, what's the budget range for this, and what do the benefits look like for this particular position? That can be one way to really begin to frame the conversation. If you're uncomfortable, it could be helpful to maybe practice out loud with someone before you actually have the conversation, so that at least you will have had an opportunity to go through the process, and it won't be fresh for you when you're in the moment. I think that's the best recommendation that I have. In terms of just philosophy, I'm really big on equity, and I recognize that different organizations view this differently. And so from my perspective, and for my part, when someone is asking me to share a job posting, I tell them I'm not going to share this job posting unless you give me a salary range.
That's me too.
Because that's only fair
Mm-hmm.
to the candidate. And you should know, like as a hiring manager, you should know what the budget is.
Mm-hmm.
And as a candidate, you should know, like if you're wasting your time applying for a position that is, you know, they're not able to offer you what you're worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a clarifying from myself, just because I want to clarify. And we have more good questions, guys. I'm see everything, okay?
Yeah.
So just say this is the situation now. I knew that the salary range was 60 to 75,000, right? Mm-hmm. We are at the point where now this varies in organizations, because sometimes hiring managers don't have the ability to negotiate salary. It's an HR person calling you, right?
That's true. So,
but okay, say you then offer me 65, but I know that the range was 60 to 75. How do you want, no, let me not say how do you want, what is an acceptable way for me to counter that with you, right? So now you've offered me 65, I want more than that. And we both knew the range when I sat down, It was on the posting. What do you think is acceptable, or what turns you off in a counter conversation? What do you want someone to display in that conversation?
So if you're gonna counter, make sure you have thought about why, right?
Okay,
So
you hear that, guys? Why?
Yeah, and so you want to. So for example, there are two things. So one is when you're countering. This is just again my perspective as a hiring manager.
Yeah.
Saying, you know what, actually, you know, first of all, I appreciate the offer. I'm excited about the opportunity of working with you. Based on my research, I think this is more and based on my experience and based on what I've learned after going through the interview process, I actually think it's more in the range of 70,000. And so I'm wondering if there is any wiggle room, and if maybe you could describe how you arrived at the number that you arrived at. That's one way you could do it. Mm-hmm. The other is, depending on the response, let's say the response is firm. Let's say that the person comes back and say, well, actually, we just learned that I actually agree with you that you're worth 70, but we just found out that the budget only allows for 65. Mm-hmm. And then you say, okay, well, that would work with me, but I'm wondering if, would it be possible for me to get extra PTO or whatever it is, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And the time to do that is before you start.
Yeah, before you accept. Yes. Yes, I've had people accept and then come back, and I'm like, no, you signed.
Yes. And so for me as a hiring manager, I'm okay with a little gentle back and forth, and I will be honest with you about the constraints, mm-hmm. but you have to be honest about yourself about what you can accept. Yes.
Yeah, we have guys, that's that walk away that that Melanie talked about, having a walk away number. And I think it's not just a number, it's also a walk away everything. So
yes,
whether it's working conditions,
exactly.
PTO, 401k, everything, that I can't accept less than this in all of this. Yes. Okay. I think
Can I say one more thing on this point?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So with the salary negotiation, I urge people not to get stuck on the number. Yes, the number is important. You want to get paid what you're worth, but again, make sure that you're thinking about this holistically, right? So it's about the number. It's about whether it's aligned. Mm-hmm. It's about the benefits. It's about the flexibility. Mm-hmm. I have accepted lower salary mm-hmm. for exchange for better quality of life, better benefits, and also better exposure mm-hmm. to set me up for my next opportunity. Yeah. And so you want to weigh all those things.
Yeah, I love that advice. Also, we had, I think it was Lisa Miller, guys, Lisa Lewis, who said she had these positions, she had jobs that were so sexy on paper. The benefits were good, the money was good, but the job itself just was not aligned with the type of person she was. And so she was miserable. So that's something to think about. Too. Yeah.
I had an experience right out of school, undergraduate, where I was a software developer for a short period of time, mm-hmm. making more money than I ever imagined, making more money than my parents had ever made. Mm-hmm. And I was miserable. Yeah. So you want to be thinking about that. It's not always about the money.
Yeah. Thank you, Meico. Okay. That was the salary. You mentioned being honest. Yes, I completely agree. How would you mention disabilities like recovering from short-term memory loss without being discriminated against? Hidden disabilities have come up quite a few times. Like,
Yes.
do we disclose them? When is the ideal time to disclose them? Is it after the interview? Is it after you take the job? Like that kind of thing.
Yes.
Yes.
So yeah, this is a tricky one. I have had this issue as a manager come up in terms of mental health
Mm-hmm.
after the person was hired.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was fun. Like I'm a different kind of manager, so I can work with you, and as long as you're getting the work done, and we can figure out how to work together to get the work done, I'm cool with that. Um, I think this is an area where I just feel like this is not my.
I hear you.
I don't. Yeah, I
Yeah,
feel
I
like
hear
you
you. All
need to
right. I hear you.
consult an attorney
Mm-hmm.
that is familiar with ADA.
All right.
Yeah.
And Amy says you clarify what she was confused on in the follow-up
Okay.
question. Yes. And I'll tell you guys, honestly, as long as a person can do their job, I don't care what they have going on. However, I would like that someone not tell me during the interview process, because if they're not selected for real reasons, verified, like just you weren't the best candidate, I don't want them to believe that they are not selected because they disclose a hidden disability. So that's just my thing. Like I don't mind someone saying to me after the offer, this is the disability I have and this is the accommodation I need. Because if you're saying I need this accommodation, but I could do this job, then your disability doesn't matter, right? So, but that, as you said, that's me. Someone else
Yeah.
may feel that not disclosing it and they give the job and then it's disclosed that you need an accommodation, even if the accommodation is consideration, because consideration is an accommodation, right? It's, that I consider it might take you a little longer to do something. That someone might feel, so may feel like they were lied to. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I just don't want anything that comes on the table that could look like discrimination. So I would prefer that you hold it. So I guess you kind of have to gauge the situation you're in. I don't even know. I'm sorry. But you know what? I'll try to find some people to come talk about it.
Yeah, and I would offer this. I think this is one of those areas where it's particularly important to make sure that being intentional about aligning with organization that shares values, right? So in many instances, you can tell by the type of organization, at least based on like the type of work they do, their values, how they're going to respond to something like this. Yeah.
Thank you. In this labor market, many say applicants have to find ways to uniquely stand out. Any suggestions? Anything an applicant did that you liked or caught your attention? Anything an applicant did to stand out that discouraged you? And this is funny because I'm older than you, Meico. When I was, a young professional, there were things like, oh, you're going to use the gray embossed resume paper, or the pink rose colored resume paper with the gold leaf. You can't do that anymore, right? So what are those things, if there are any?
Yes. So first of all, the 7 things that I mentioned, right? So following directions, being intentional about the alignment. If you have an opportunity to write a cover letter, using that as an opportunity to stand out. Don't just regurgitate. The cover letter is not an opportunity for you to regurgitate the job requirements. We already know what the job requirements are. I want to know about your story and what makes you unique, why I should hire you. Your cover letter should explain why I should hire you. In terms of ways to stand out, I've hired often for technology and communications positions. And so one of the ways that I've seen candidates stand out is if you are able to link to a portfolio of relevant work and experience that maybe you're not able to show on your resume. So let's say if you're a writer and like I'm hiring for a communications position and you want to showcase that what kind of writing you do, like send me a link to your blog or your portfolio, for example. If you are applying for a software development position or web development position, send me a link to portfolio of things that you've actually done with some testimonials from folks that you helped. that is one way that you can definitely stand out.
Okay, I love it. All right. And for you guys, I see we have some Zoom people now. If you have any questions, please drop them into chat. These questions are from Facebook, from the Facebook group. How would you feel if an applicant called? Oh, this is different. This happened in the group. So how would you feel if an applicant called or emailed shortly after the interview, like when they got in their car or home, to address something in more detail that was asked in an interview? We had this happen where someone in the group posted this very thing up for the career coaches. And I believe she said she called when she got in her car. She remembered something and called.
I think this is going to be variable depending on the person. I would say for me, like, I would find, I would say email. If you're gonna do the follow up like that, do email. For me, calling that's not good.
Yeah. I don't even remember. I have to find that post and find out if that person got that job. I do know that it was a very thoughtful thing that the person was recommending, recommending in light of COVID, something that she thought of.
Okay, it was a recommendation for the employer?
It was a it was a recommendation based on some comment. It was that doing some things via Zoom could change some things that they didn't think about. And it was really thoughtful, and it was a way that it could combat a challenge that the hiring manager had, said in the interview, but she didn't think of it in the interview. And it popped in her head in the car, and she called. But she said she heard the surprise in his voice. And so that prompted her to then come into the group and ask us, did I do the wrong thing?
Okay, so what I would do in that scenario then is to, in my thank you note, include a PS that addresses blah, blah, blah. So thank you for blah, 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 blah. PS, I noticed X, Y, and Z. In case it's helpful, I would suggest da, 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 da.
Yeah, I like that. All right. Any advice on behavior-based interview questions? What do you want to hear in general?
I didn't use behavioral interview questions.
Really?
But I think generally speaking, I'm an experiential person, so we actually give you a task to.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So you're gonna make them show and prove. Okay.
Yeah. So we're gonna have you write a press release and develop a release plan or whatever it is.
All right. It's okay. So that's not one for you, Meico. It's okay. All right. So if you guys want to interview with Meico, be prepared to have a test. Some practical work you have to do. Okay. Will you share or come back and talk to us about any tips to disconnect from devices and maintain good balance with tech and life? Any exercises? We are on devices more than ever now.
That is a Danette question. I'll leave it up to her.
We have.
You want me back?
You can come back whenever you want. Yeah. Yes, Meico can come back and talk about that. I kind of told them that was one of the things you do, because some questions came up during a tech presentation on Monday. And I said, well, Meico will be here. I don't think he'll be doing that because he has this other thing, but that's what he does. And I think I read your bio on Monday night so everyone can hear it. So let's see, we have a couple more questions. All right, so we have some comments, and I'll just give you a quick. So we have a lot of likes and loves and that kind of stuff. One new strategy I will try is to focus more on following the instructions and being an active listener. That comes from Rhonda. I look forward to this live. Oh, you're welcome, Latanya. And this is from Latanya, and she says, what are some examples of good questions that can't be found online? Any unique questions? And this is for the candidate is asking you.
Yeah. I think that's a hard one. But I can give you some that I think are, even though they're probably recycled questions, I give you some that are probably really good. So asking questions about, for example, how the hiring manager thinks about, success for this particular role, for example?
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, if I were to start tomorrow, you know, can you give me a sense of what kind of challenges you're facing and what I might be immediately working on, for example, or what do you need support with? Asking questions, if it's not like readily available on the website or in the annual report,
Mm-hmm.
for example, during COVID, for example,
Mm-hmm.
we're dealing with the pandemic, for example, asking a question about how the organization is thinking about pivoting for COVID. If alignment in terms of social justice values is something that's important to you, which is important to me. So I ask questions about, so like how are you all thinking about the issues related to race? How do you all think about LGBTQ inclusion, for example? You know, the question about disability, for example, that would be something to bring up, you know, for anyone, right? So how are you all being inclusive of people that are differently abled? Those are, and then again, doing your homework and asking questions that are perhaps specific to the industry. So for example, if I'm interviewing for a technology role, and presumably if you're interviewing for a technology role, you're staying abreast of what's happening with new changes, for example. So if I'm a social media manager, for example, I might ask questions about, well, you know, Facebook has been in the news a lot lately about you know, censorship as it relates to political ads, and lots of people have pulled their ads from Facebook in terms of blah blah blah. As you think about your ad strategy, what are you all thinking about in terms of that?
Yeah, that's a good one too.
And where possible, for things like that, also be ready to offer your suggestions. Because I might come back to you, so you know what, that's a great question. You know, we've been so bogged down and getting ready for fundraising, so we haven't thought about that. But what do you think about that?
What do you think about it? Yeah. LinkedIn, Latanya also says LinkedIn is a great resource. It is how I earn my current role. Charlene says, how do you feel about people quoting a salary? Also, your take on an open salary answer on an application. So when someone says, I'm open on a salary, when they ask you what's your salary requirement, like when they
I feel like that's not following directions.
You hear that, Charlene?
That's just me as a hiring manager. I feel like that's not following directions.
That's not following directions. Okay. Rhonda says, please come back. I always ask this. She does. She wants everybody to come back. The technology is a lot. Yes, guys, it's a lot. Okay. So those are all of the questions that I have from the group, but they may be more that come up.
Okay.
Now I'm going to go to my 3. I just want to thank you. This was actually a great conversation. You know, Meico, I don't usually talk to you guys much when you're presenting. I might have to start doing a little more of this. I read a couple questions, but this was a really nice conversation that we've had. I just do my 3 questions and I kind of let you do your thing the whole time. So I really like this. And I also want to tell you, I really like your picture. Your smile is beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's a really nice picture. All right. So, you know, we're Corona Daze Professional Development Group. I have my 3 questions, so you're on my hot seat, but they're not bad. So, Meico, CDPD's mission is to increase marginalized groups' access to employment opportunities and representation in the workforce, by providing our members with free training, mentorship, and other resources. CDPD was created in response to record unemployment and underemployment rates stemming from the COVID-19 pandemic. Could you share with us if you have ever been marginalized, and if so, how or why? And keeping in mind that we don't marginalize ourselves, right? There are people with small minds and people who are usually afraid of us, right? They see something great in us, they're afraid of us, and they marginalize us for that. I asked this question so that our members can see that even if you are marginalized, you too can own your own business and be successful. Be a successful hiring manager, responsible for hiring people, responsible for ensuring that there's equity and inclusion in the workplace. So that's why I asked the question, okay?
Okay. So my last role was a communications director. So I understand what you're asking, and I'm gonna offer a different framing because of
Okay,
the
that's
language.
okay. We always get that. That's
Yeah.
okay.
So
That's
the
all
language
right.
is
Yeah, y'all, you guys do it.
so the language is important to me, and
Yes.
also I believe no one can take away our power unless you allow them to. So that's the perspective from which I respond to this. So in that sense, the way I think about this and the way the question lands for me, I would say that no one can really marginalize me unless I allow them to do that.
Yes.
But that being said, I understand the intention behind the question, and I would say that I would describe it as friction, perhaps.
Okay.
So the friction that I have encountered has been related to a combination of my what appears to be my relatively young age and my race and also my gender. So having worked in federal government and worked in nonprofit sector, for the most part, it's just older white folks. Right?
Yeah, the baby boomers.
And throughout my career, I have been in positions where I'm managing and providing direction to older white folks. And so people are just like, who is this young Black guy who's like coming up here, like, setting things up and directing people and managing folks, and managing projects, et cetera. And so earlier in my career, I think that I had some insecurities to work through as it relates to that. But I'm fortunate that I had very supportive mentors and supervisors that were able to support me and just reassure me that, like, you're supposed to be here. Yeah. You're doing a great job. And people will get over it.
Yeah, and that's it. It's them. They have to get over it. Yeah, I love it. And again, we don't marginalize ourselves, right? So, and I don't look at myself as marginalized. Somebody might have, in a situation, placed me in a box because of something. But it's the way I fought to get out of that box, or the way I fought not to be put in that box, that I want to hear from you. Yes. So thank you for that one, Meico.
You're welcome.
The next question I have is, they're talking about unwinding about technology. So they really want you to come back on that one. I always check to see if, because I want my last question to be my last question. So I'll come back to two things that are in there. So this next question is, what would you say to you just gave us a good segue. What would you say to the younger Meico when he either began his educational or professional journey that now that it would have done something for you if you knew it then?
Yes. So a few things.
Okay.
One is to just do it, even if it's imperfect. I think I spent a lot of time fearing that if I was going to do something that was going to be imperfect. But one of the things I've learned as I've grown and matured is that there's no such thing as a pain-free, challenge-free, or failure-free life. That's how we grow and evolve. And so to just do it, and you're going to get there faster, and you're going to be stronger and more resilient because of it. So that's one thing. Right. The second thing is I wish I had saved more money. And more specifically, I wished I had bought a house sooner. Okay. So for younger folks that are in your career, what I recommend is, I know that you're moving around, but if you have the means, even if you have to like scrape to make it happen, buy some property. Buy a multifamily home.
Yes, multifamily home.
And do it early. Yeah. Because what you can do is you can rent, even if you move away, you can rent it out, and that's passive income that you're bringing in. That's wealth building. So I would have done that sooner. And then the last thing I would say, and this is particularly me thinking about how I could have set myself up better to launch my current business, which is, I think one of the fastest way to get to where you want to go is to find someone that's already been there, or someone who's going in the same direction, and hire them to help you get there. So I would have hired one of the things I would have done differently is I would have hired a business coach to work with before I quit my job. That would have helped me get to where I'm going faster.
Yeah, yeah. I love it. And guys, Meico does not use Facebook. So unfortunately, we can't have him come in to the group and just talk to us. But you hit quite a few things that we talk about all the time. One of them being about building wealth. And we are always here now looking for multiple streams of income and ways for us to build wealth. So yeah, you definitely have to come back, Meico, and talk about anything you'd like. But I think the next thing they want you to talk about is technology, because they say, now I'm just giving you some comments. The technology is a lot. The ways to unwind using so much technology affects a lot of people. After being on my laptop or cell phone for a certain amount of time, I feel extremely irritable. So we definitely want you to come back for that. And no one can take away our power unless we allow them to. No one can marginalize us unless I allow, yes. But the friction is what I was faced with. Yeah, I think, yeah, Charlene. Okay, so that's all I have. I'm gonna give you my final question and we're gonna let you go. So if you could just leave us with one takeaway, if we only took away one thing today, what do you want that to be?
So I've been talking about this a lot in light of the pandemic and what's happening with social unrest around the world. And that is the overarching message that 2020 and your life at large isn't canceled. That how are you going to get to where you're going might have changed, but your why is still the same, right? So you've been called to do a specific work, right? You've been drawn to a specific career opportunity in the context of what we're talking about today. That hasn't changed. How you get there, yes, the circumstances in which we do that has changed. And it's okay to reevaluate your plan in terms of how you get there. The other thing I would say too is that connected to this is specifically as it concerns career search. I know lots of folks are frustrated perhaps by the lengthy process, the uncertain process. And the one thing that we don't have control over is the external circumstances, but we have control over how we're responding to those things. And I invite people to not beat your head up against the wall, but to perhaps embrace that if things aren't working out the way that you want them to embrace the opportunity to ask yourself, what's what you've always wanted to do, and do that. Yeah. Because the world isn't going back to quote unquote normal for any time soon. And so particularly if you're younger and you just graduated from college and you're just like, what's going on? Go figure out what you want to do. You always wanted to be a chef, or you always want to do X, Y, and Z. Go do that thing. And when the economy comes back, you'll be able to get a job. Yeah. You'll be fine.
Well, I thank you, Meico. And yes, buying property, very helpful information and guidance. Thank you, Meico. And why I say you're not on Facebook, so you don't know, I'll tell you this. So I, and then our, one of the other admins in the group, we post up. So when you say stuff to us, it comes back to you. Okay. So you're not going to be here to see that. So we randomly post up stuff that you said, the quotes. So okay. Yeah. I usually am writing when you're talking, but as I said, it's been interactive with you and I, so I haven't been writing. And so all these quotes then come up and you get tagged in them. So Rhonda, you're going to have to do that on LinkedIn and on Facebook for Meico, because he's not going to see them unless you post some of those on LinkedIn, because you guys always drop really good gems for us and you don't realize it because you're just talking, but these things resonate. And so we post them and tag you. So that's why I'm like, you're not here, you're not going to be able to get in it. But I really appreciate you coming out today. Everyone loved this. They're thanking you. And you are welcome to come back whenever you'd like, and covering anything you'd like, Meico. I really appreciate you for being a supporter and friend of CDPD.
Awesome. And I look forward to, so you and I will connect to figure out, next steps.
All right. Perfect. Thank you, Meico.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.